I'm going to start with you first, Brendan. When you hear the name Padraigh Griffin, what's the first memory or moment you think of?
I was a couple of years older than him, so I can recall my younger brother Eamonn coming home from an under 21 championship match saying that to this fella Griffin, who played on the team. And I said, "What age is he?" And he reckoned he was still about only 15 stroke 16 at the time. And that's all he could talk about. I didn't actually recall whether they won the game or not, but that's all he was talking about. And that was the first moment I heard. Um, Obviously, I knew of him because I was in the town and you'd be aware of who people were, but that was the first moment for me that this guy was something special because my brother just could not stop talking about him.
Same question to you, Eamon. What's your first thought when you hear Padraig's name?
Like for me, I'd be a bit younger. I'd be a couple of years younger than Pod. So, for me, when I was a kid, like our thing was soccer, the courts, after school, lunchtime, before school, um, going into the hall. Sometimes not through the correct route, but it was always about playing ball, and it was always about the best game possible. And if we had nine, as Shay said the day of the funeral, unfortunately, if we had nine, Griff always wanted to be on the team of four because he always wanted to test himself that little bit more, you know. So that would have been my first memories, and then obviously, GA. Uh, I was I was kind of coming up behind him, so he was blazing the trail at our club level, uh, at under 21 and minor, but he never really, even though he was brilliant to us and for us, he never took off until the kind of the 96 year that he exploded onto the scene completely, you know.
Going to chat about 96 quite soon, and we're going to chat about Padraig the footballer as well and what a superstar he was for Clon. But he was more than that to so many people too. He was a husband to Debbie, he was a dad to Jack and Alex, he was a friend, a teammate. Can you tell me a small bit more about Padraig off the field, what he was like?
Padraig was naturally shy, you know. He preferred to be in the corner. If we were having a drink in the pub afterwards, he certainly wouldn't be taking center stage. He was quietly spoken, and he was a kind of a deep guy in a lot of ways. You know, didn't want the limelight whatsoever on the field. He was a totally different personality. He was off the cuff, but he was very private. Padraig was private and never one to make too much noise at all outside the pitch. He'd amble down to training. You wouldn't almost see him come in the door of the training room pitch. You know, he'd amble in and amble out and didn't do a huge amount of socializing. Some of us maybe did a little bit more, but Padraig was the type of guy who probably went home and preferred to watch soccer matches or football matches, or he was big into computer games as well. So that's the type of thing he did. He lived very, very low key, kind of a life really, where he had a couple of passions, but he certainly never made a song and a dance about too many of them.
Eamon, Brendan said there he was kind of kept a low profile, didn't like the limelight. I think he went into the spotlight in 96, and I'm thinking of that semi-final in Bandon against the Bars. I think where Clon, couple of 2 points down, going into injury time. Monaghan had a free drop short ball, the rebound fell. The Padraig Griffin, and from what I heard, is the rest is history. Out of nothing, he created this goal, got Clonakilty into the county final, and the rest is history after that. Was that one of the moments where Padraig Griffin announced himself as a real footballer in, I suppose, county-wide?
Yeah, I suppose that year was a real kickstart year for us as a group, and I'm talking about the whole club as a group, but from under 21 upwards, really that year was a kickstart year. Like before we got to the day in Bandon, I was lucky enough that I was part of an under 21 team for Clon that won the first under 21 West title, and we were captained by Griff. So our magic was starting a little bit earlier in the year, you know, with this under 21, and he was tormenting every club team in that all the way through before we got as far as the bars. But like, there was an awful lot about that like game that, you know, I think we were only a point down anyway, and a point would have done us to draw the game. So it's just it showed the ambition of the guy that he just wanted to take the shot on, and you know, as was said, John Kearns and the defender got a block in it, but it's only Griff would have gone for the second shot. You know, most people would have ran out the gate with a draw down to 14 men, unfortunately. But most fellas would have kind of gone, Jesus, you know, get us out of here with a draw. We'd be dead happy and get back another day and try and have another cut off and, you know, try and be in the same position again, you know.
And then went on to the county final then. Sorry, goes on to the county final against UCC, and a certain future All-Ireland captain in Seamus Moynihan and an all-star defender, Padraigh Griffin, ran him ragged that day. Is that one of the days that also kind of accelerated the reputation that Padraigh was building up at the time?
Yeah, well, Brendan would probably know more from the college side of things, but Padraigh was in college at the time, and they knew of him, but I don't think they expected, you know, what came that day. Like, it's fine to say that, you know, the team won it, but I think that day the team was being pushed by, I'd say, 25,000 people that were there, kids, grandparents, you know, everything. But definitely, Mr. Moynihan definitely had his test that day with Paddy anyway, you know.
Mm.
Brendan, just to get your own recollections of '96 and the role Padraigh Griffin played in that famous Clonakilty win. I think it was the first time, was it in over 44 years, the Clon were crowned senior champions again?
That's right. We just went on the crest of a wave, essentially, after jump starting the first game against Shandoon and getting over that just in a terrible quality game, and that's where we were. I think it was the total confidence thing. Like most teams, when you get on a run and a winning run, it's almost as hard to get out of that as it is to win a game if you're not winning. But like, we had a solid game against Ballincollig in the second game and beat a very fancy Duhallow team in the quarterfinal. But it was that blistering late summer game in September of 1996 where we played the Bars. And looking back in one or two photographs of it recently, you just see that the place was as packed as it would ever be. And that made for the theatre it was. So it got the fitting end from the point of view of Padraig's goal. But I remember Padraigh explaining the goal afterwards, and I was actually directly in his line of sight, and I understood totally what he was saying. You know, the free kick fell short. It went into his hand. Certainly the first kick, he should have popped it over the bar. Like, there was one or two of the Bars defenders on the goal line, and John Kearns, God rest him, you know, one of the best Cork keepers of his generation, inside in goal. And he had a shot that was really a shot of nothing, and it came off John Kearns's hands, which was a good save for him. But the actual rebound, there was so much momentum from the Bars defence. The two guys that were in goal, they had rushed out. John Kearns was on the ground. You know, from my angle, and Padraigh said it afterwards, it was an easy goal. There was a big open goal right in front of him, and he was straight bang on the target. So the goal was there to be taken, and like Padraigh, you know, that's what he was about. He was not going to turn that chance down. There were plenty of other goals that he got in games, which had such slender margins to try and get the goal, and he eked goals out of there. But that day, the goal was on the second shot. It wasn't on the first shot, but that was him. He had the courage and the single-mindedness which you need in a team to take on the shot. And he took it. He got a second chance. It just fell into his lap. He was so lucky. It fell into his lap, and it was a fairy tale ending, which took him to the final as a kind of a marked man, because he had played so well in the semi-final. And whereas he didn't score in the final, he absolutely ran Seamus Moynihan all over the pitch, and they had a man marking job. Obviously, Seamus was not really interested in coming forward, which was probably a tactic that fell into our hands because Seamus Moynihan obviously was an outstanding emerging inter-county player at the time, and if he had been attacking from centre back, we'd have something to mind, but we didn't. He just watched Padraigh Griffin for the entire game. They followed each other all over the place, and they had a great battle. They absolutely had a fantastic 1-on-1. I would say it was 50-50 by the end of the game, but like that, what it did for us is it freed up other players, and other players were able to score, and we kept the pressure on, and thankfully came out the winning side on the day, which bridged 44 years of a gap, and I suppose inspired the next generation then.
Several Clonakilty legends were born that day in 96 when he ended that long wait, including Padraig's legend. And after his passing, there was a statement from Clonakilty GA, and it said he was probably the best player to have worn the green and red in recent times. So, Eamonn, just how good was Padraigh?
He was mercurial. He was our Maurice Fitz, our Seamus Moynihan. For me, he was at the best level that I've probably played with, and I presume the reason I probably think that is because I think he got us out of more holes than anybody else in the county. Other people got winning scores in games, but the magic came from what Griff did. It's hard to put your finger on it, but he just came up with the goods so often that you're kind of going, like, you think back and you're like, Jesus, the guy was just magical. Like, he was our Messi or Maradona or Maurice Fitz, whatever you want to call it. He was that to us, in my opinion, anyway.
Brendan, on Twitter, Richie Forrestal, he posted a lovely tweet, a lovely tribute to Padraigh. He said, the best footballer many of us ever laid eyes upon, a diminutive colossus. He was a wizard with a ball in his hands, whose magic entertained us for years, how he made us cheer. And Brendan, you would have seen so much more of Padraigh the footballer than we did at training and in games. So what do you think made him such a good player?
He was self-taught, and I think that's something special because everything he did, he taught himself. I can remember him as, 15 or 16 and 17-year-old kid walking around the streets of Clon with a football in his hand all the time. He was constantly tapping it. He was constantly moving it. He was that kind of skill that he had. No one coached it to him. He was self-taught, and I think that's what we're probably missing a little bit in today's game. Everyone's almost robotic in terms of the way we play the game, and Padraigh had this instinct that he had, taught himself and had it in his natural ability, but he brought it out of himself by just constantly practicing and trying things, and he'd frustrate you as well. Padraigh was always using games as an opportunity to try something different, or maybe the same thing over and over again. If he failed the first, second, third, or fourth time, he could sell 4 or 5 dummies. But if the dummies weren't bought, he'd go back and he'd sell a 6th and 7th one to try and make it work, So he was constantly trying to improve his game. And I suppose, it was that wizardry that he had. I'd go back to another generation. He was the Georgie Best of Clonakilty football. He had the black long hair just like him. He had the swagger just like him. He loved dumbing guys. He loved shimming, and he loved eyeing up for a goal. The points really didn't matter. There were plenty of games too. Eamonn was mentioning the games that he won for us. There was plenty of games too. I suppose Padraigh could have shot for points, and we would have got home and won by a point or two. But sometimes, that just natural instinct in him. He just wanted a goal, top corner of the net kind of job, put the game to bed. And just the odd occasion, they didn't work. But most of the time, in fairness to them, they did.
Eamonn,
sorry, Kieran, just on that, Brendan's talking about the self-taughtness, and like that's a fact. But I think a lot of players that were coming out to training weren't actually aware, because Griff used to be there 10 minutes before training, 15 minutes before training, 20 minutes before training, but he was always jinking and dumbing, and he'd have a line of balls and he'd go back out and he'd come again. And like he used to be going to me, Harty, where were you? Where are you late? Like, because training wasn't until 7, he'd be there at 20, but he'd want somebody to shoot at for the 20 minutes beforehand. But he was always jinking in between guys that were still walking onto the pitch. You know, they were on time for training, but this was his little thing that I'm going to jink between all these guys. And, you know, that's probably where some of it came from, you know.
Mm.
Because he developed into one of the most lethal club forwards in the county. We talked about some of his wow moments there. So, Eamonn, some other moments that stand out to you when you think of Padraigh in a Clon jersey. Any game, any goal, any point immediately jump to mind?
Well, the goal in Limerick in the Munster Championship against Clon. Jesus, I'd say that's. I don't know, Brenner, if you agree, but it looked like one of the best goals I've ever seen anyway.
Yeah, you actually, it's thankfully it's caught on tape, and in slow motion it still looks fast.
Yeah.
What he did, he did it, one or two little swerves of the hips, sold the most outrageous dummy, put it onto his other foot, and he absolutely clinged the top corner of the net. Keeper just was standing there. It was, and that was his third goal that day. He scored 3 goals in that Munster Club Championship, and I think that was probably the best one I've seen, without a doubt. I'd agree with Eamonn there.
Like, even listening to the 2V talk now, there's so many wow moments there. How lucky were Clonakilty fans for so long to be entertained by the skills of Padraigh?
Oh, geez, like I think and beyond as well, you know. Again, reading some of the comments and thoughts that people put down that had nothing to do with Clonakilty, but just used to come to Clon games to watch and play, you know. And again, that's something we miss in today's games. Someone as authentic and as different and wizardry as Padraigh, because everyone loves a forward like that. And just for that one moment in a game, or one moment in 3 games, it's worth waiting for, kind of a thing. And sometimes, you know, he didn't always play great games. Sometimes he just wasn't in the mood, just like all of us were. But when that moment happened in a game, you'd kind of say, well, there's nobody else would have done that. Nobody else would have ever done that. And I think that's why people came out in their droves to watch him play, because there was always the potential of something different or something special. You know, the rest of us were kind of plodders, as we call ourselves, just going around passing A to B. But when Padraigh had the ball inside, you know, you just knew that, you know, there was an extra little bit of a intensity around it. You could see in the backs that, you know, they were standing off him because they just didn't want to go near him. And the crowd used to react to that as well.
And by the time we got to 2009, that was 13 years later. So I put Padraigh was 34 when Clon won that county title. Did he evolve as a forward over that time? By the time he got to that county final against the Bars 13 years later, was he a different Padraigh Griffin footballer, or was he still trying the audacious and the cheeky?
He was definitely still trying it anyway. There's no doubt about that. How would you say? I'd say the difference was that come those years later, he was kind of more aware of that he couldn't do it every single time he got the ball, but he was trying to decide who he'd pass to then to make sure he'd get it back. So he had kind of changed his way of going, because he knew that defenders all over the county, and, you know, guys that played in college with him and stuff like that, they all had experienced it. They all knew what was coming. So they kind of started coming up with ways to try and stop him, whether it was pull the jersey clean off him, or you know, like there were several ways, and guys tried everything to stop him. So Griff just adapted at times. And like when he got on the ball, you were kind of going, okay, what's going to happen next? And it was always it was never a set play. You can see a forward getting a ball, and you're kind of saying, okay, the play is this, and the play inevitably happens. With Pod, like, we're never sure what you're going to get. He could jink a fella and take him on, or he could turn back across the field, give it 60-yard ball, and you're kind of going, you know, it's not to play, but then he ends up on it again. So it was kind of it was weird in that respect. But that's what I thought Padraigh kind of changed, that he realized that he couldn't take it on all the time, because he might have 2 or 3 guys chasing him, and they weren't just chasing him to say hello, like they were hauling the life out of him, you know.
Mm.
And Brendan, how did he cope with that tag of, like, obviously he was a standout forward for Clonakilty for so long and everybody knew about him. Like, we've just talking about just how good he was, but the fact that other teams would have targeted Padraigh, they knew they had to stop him. How did he cope? How did he cope with that pressure?
I never heard him give out about it. The one thing he didn't like is unfairness. He hated players who were dirty. You know, that's the one thing that used to irk him, because he wanted the game played fairly. But I suppose he had to be a little bit realistic in that, you know, some defenders will step over the line a little bit. So, but he could never understand that. He could not understand why some fellas might try and puck him or step over the line a good bit in terms of stopping him from play. I played in one or two games. I remember when ourselves and Carberry were, you know, going toe to toe a few years. I think it was the year that Carberry won it. They took us to a replay. Actually, myself and Griff missed the replay because we were both injured. But I remember in the first game, they had 2 guys on him, one marking and one straight in front, and they had another guy sweeping back. You know, I think he had admired it in a kind of a strange kind of way, that he was getting so much attention, but he wanted the ball. So I'd say it used to frustrate the life out of him as well.
He's left such an amazing legacy in a Clonakilty jersey, and even far beyond Clon. We saw that with the tributes that were paid to Padraigh. So I'm going to put the last question to both of you. How do you think Padraigh will be remembered, and how should he be remembered?
That's a big question. I think the word wizard comes into mind, because, like, he was. There's no doubt about it. He was an absolute wizard on the ball and on his game, and you know, he pulled things out that you didn't possibly think could be done in moments, and he certainly left a lot of fond memories from that wizardry on the pitch, and unbelievably prepared for games and dedicated. He was a professional in the amateur club scene. He trained so diligently. He didn't really socialize that much outside. Maybe after a game, he might let his hair down, but everything he ate, he researched it to the last in terms of preparation and being right for it. And you know, he was an outstanding example for anyone in terms of wanting to be the best they possibly could. And he dedicated his playing career to football at the time. You know, there was no this. It was first, second, and third. It was definitely first, second, and third. But wizardry, I suppose, going back to the question, he was a wizard.
Same question to Eamonn. Like I said, Clonakilty had so many outstanding footballers over the years, but how would you like Padraigh to be remembered?
I suppose nowadays there's lots of people have phones out every time there's a game. You know, we're lucky we've a couple of scratchy VHS tapes banging around the place somewhere there. With the trials of Griff, like, of when the magic happened, and I'd like for that to be the magic that I remember anyway, because I'm telling everybody about the days and the good stuff, and down in the dunes, and like Griff loved this dunes down in the Shidani where we used to go. He loved it, like, and it was kind of a sadistic kind of madness that he had, that he loved it so much that he loved the train down there. The rest of us was going, oh Jesus, not again, not down here. But he was running around down there and loved every second of it. So, like, for going forward, legend. Like, there's no other word I can put on Griff. He was a legend. Lucky that I called him a teammate and a friend. But he was a legend and a hero to me, as well as a playing partner, as well as a teammate. You know, all those guys, you have a serious bond with everyone that you win anything with. So I was lucky with Brenner and Pod and Murph and a couple more guys that we were lucky enough to be on a couple of panels that won. We were unlucky enough to be on a couple of teams that should have won as well, but it didn't happen. So yeah, legend. You know, his name shouldn't be forgotten. It shouldn't be just, you know, one of these things that he's remembered once every now and again. If I had my way, I'd put him up in a statue next to Michael Collins' side in town, you know, but that's just the way it goes, you know. It wouldn't be very big either.
It's a very fitting tribute, Eamon. Just want to thank both of you for your time and just for reminiscing and regaling about one of the outstanding footballers that West Cork has produced in recent times. So thanks so much for your time, lads.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thanks, Kieran.